Hello, and welcome to Retrospective Cinema, a podcast wherein we'll endeavor week after week to see the full filmographies of chosen directors. We'll interpret, critique, and discuss. I am your co host, Annie Morell.
And I'm your other co-host, Ryan Saylor. This week we have the privilege of diving into one of the great films of the past couple decades. This is Paul Thomas Anderson's There Will Be Blood. Here's the clip.
Ladies and gentlemen, I've traveled over half our state to be here tonight. I couldn't get away sooner because my new well was coming in at Coyote Hills and I had to see about it. That well is now flowing at 2,000 barrels and it's paying me an income of $5,000 a week. I have 2 others drilling and I have 16 producing at Antelope, so... Ladies and gentlemen, if I say I'm an oil man, you will agree.
All right, we are completionists on Retrospective Cinema, so if you've been with us for the past couple weeks, every time that we've come back from the clip, we've had to go through a number of shorts and things made in between features. Last week we had plentiful, there were like 10, but actually this time we have nothing. And so this week we get to dive in. I'm happy for the extra time, as this is an epic film in every sense of the word, and honestly a little intimidating to talk about as it's so loved. How are you feeling?
Oh, I mean, I'm excited to talk about this one. It's one I've seen before, but it's been over a decade since I watched it. And I feel like, now that I'm more of an adult, I caught so much more. And to be able to watch this with a little more, experience under my belt was a joy. I mean, I loved it even back then, and I think I loved it even more now. So, yeah. Let's do it. 1898 is when the story starts.
Yeah, so we get a couple of things right off the bat. You get the very famous, all but one word silent opening, and that one word's improvised. So it was meant to be silent, but at one point, Daniel Plainview, as played by Daniel Day-Lewis, says no, I think is the one word. But yes, outside of that, the first 14 minutes is essentially a silent film set to the score, which we really immediately get.
Scraping ominous strings.
Yeah, it's very strings heavy, very dissonant score composed by Johnny Greenwood of Radiohead, and I guess film fame at this point. It's been a number of times. This actually is not our first Johnny Greenwood score, although we didn't talk about him as much with his collaborations with Lynn Ramsey. This is a much more prominent score, obviously.
As iconic as the movie, just within its own right.
Yeah. And I guess we're immediately exposed to the towering performance that begins from Daniel Day-Lewis. So which of those 3 things would you like to start with?
I mean, let's talk about the silence. I love that it's all Braun for the first 15 minutes or so, 14 minutes or so, that it is showing his kind of humble beginnings with no... There doesn't need to be any dialogue. It's incredible visual storytelling. I feel like you even immediately start to get an idea of who this man is. Certainly his tenacity. I mean, I don't know. What things do you want to say about that?
Yeah, it's so cool. So real quick, getting it out of the way. We did not get it out of the way last week. We are a full spoiler podcast. If you're not into that, click away. On that note, immediately, I think one of my absolute favorite elements of this film, I've seen it a lot of times, much like last week's. After this, we're going to get to a bunch of PTA that I've only seen once, so I'm excited to revisit all of that. But one of my favorite elements of this film, and I think the single best choice from a plotting perspective, is that we begin with Daniel when he is who we'd say is, the good side of hustling, of a businessman, of anything like that. It's a man that's down in the dirt, he's getting his hands dirty, he's earning his money. And I think that's such a crucial... Really
starting from scratch, pulling himself up by his bootstraps.
Right. No, but honestly, like he's I mean, it's the American dream. It's this man that's doing all the work and he's gonna get paid for it. I think that's so crucial to the story, because if you begin this parable of greed or capitalism, or I'm sure we'll get into all of what the film represents to you or me specifically, if you begin that when that all encroaching greed is there, which it is by the end of the film, there's nothing to feel for. It's like, okay, I'll avoid that. But that person at the beginning of the film is someone that a lot of people would strive to be and probably still do all around us. So I've probably talked too much about the single bit already, but that I think it's so crucial to the film.
Oh yeah, I would agree. Yeah, he's starting from scratch, and you see him. I think it's important to show him doing that work. That's why I'm glad that we have that extended bit where he's just down in the hole himself. Like, it really does start with just him, and then a little bit of, like, a couple of years, I think, go by.
Mm-hmm.
And then he kind of has this partner who's it's taken so long too, this little time jump we do, 1902 from 1898. Like, it took him that long to get to just having, like, maybe another business partner or hiring a guy, whoever the other guy is. And then he kind of builds his crew up from there. But he's down, and one thing, that carries through most of the movie is that he is not afraid to, like, he's never too good to be out in the field. And this kind of misanthropic part of him is maybe even happier to be out, like, working in a more solitary way. So excellent character establishment, cool sequence, and I think, in the sequence that is showing someone who we should admire, the thing that I think signals to the audience that there is maybe evil to come is this haunting score, this unnerving score that's happening through all of this. That sure, it's him, striking oil, which is, back in that day, like, such a prosperous thing. That's a good positive thing, but it's very foreboding because it is this substance that is the root of a lot of, like, evil and harm in this world. And so I love the kind of juxtaposition of the actual, like, look of crude oil is not particularly pleasant, and then juxtaposed with this unnerving score. We are talking probably too long about this part, but it's so good.
On the score, I just going on the record that this is my favorite film score, like, hands down. I think it's I think besides the brilliance of it, like I do put this thing on, which maybe says something about me, I don't know, just to listen to, but outside of the music, I think this is a substantially different film without the score. And I think that is something so rare. Like, this is not a score. Like, there are moments of pure cinema where the score elevates the scene. I'm picturing, like, Twin Suns on Tatooine, very famous moment where that's a great shot, but then the music coming in is what makes that scene iconic. But just this whole film, the way the score interacts with it is so fascinating to me. And I have thought about just putting this thing on mute and seeing if it's a different movie. It's just I love what the score does to this film, and I love that it strings forward, and just all of it.
It's almost another character. I would say it's maybe even the third character after Daniel and Eli. I adore it as well. Definitely in the top. I don't know if I have them ranked specifically, but in my top favorite scores of all time, for sure. So we have this 15 minutes of just Daniel Day-Lewis. I assume he just actually dug that entire hole himself in real life.
That sounds like him.
It does. It would, he's a method actor, for the 5 people on this earth that don't know that. So
I mean, famously, like, most people would say he goes too far, but outside of acting circles, like, if you were just to tell someone, this man built a log cabin that he stayed in for a whole film, or this man didn't walk because his character was paraplegic, you're like, all right, well, that's crazy. But when you get performances like this, it's hard to argue with the results.
I agree. So 15 minutes of silence, and we get this whole picture of him as his brawn, I guess. And then immediately we're launched into this first speech, this first pitch that he's giving, which really just immediately shows that he has the cunning, the brains to pull this kind of thing off himself. Because you really do need to have both the, like, physical skill and the wherewithal to make these kinds of deals and maneuver around in that kind of world as well. And I think that's one of the most fascinating parts of his character, is that even though he markets himself as, I'm just an oil man, I'm gonna talk plainly, I'm gonna plain speak to you, he does have that kind of conniving ability to negotiate and persuade, manipulate. And I think this speech is just an immediate example of that, because it is very persuasive.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so much interesting stuff that hints toward how conniving he is when the film hasn't fully revealed itself yet. Besides just all the family man talk, it's when he gets to California, which we can jump back if you want, but when he gets to California and he's sitting down with that family, and Eli knows that they're being played, but he's the only one. There's so many interesting moments. Even right before it, his son asks him, like, oh, what are we going to pay them? And he says, like, well, we're going to pay them quail prices.
Yeah.
We're going to pay them quail prices. His son even then is like, oh, like, that's wrong. Like, we're doing something wrong. But I think the audience can still be like, okay, you know, like, that's smart if disingenuous. But yeah, I mean, these small pieces build up and up until eventually, I mean, he's unforgivable.
Yeah, well, and another little lie that he tells to different family, I believe, is just saying that his wife died in childbirth, because clearly he recognizes that they're kind of traditional people who want to be maybe selling to like a family man.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, HW, his son, obviously is a prop in all of that. And he even, skipping to the end, he fully acknowledges that by the end,
Well,
that at least, I don't think, I think we get a more complete picture than that. I definitely don't think that HW is just a prop always 100% of the time. I think why the character is interesting is that he clearly does deeply care for his son that he had to raise. Well, he didn't have to raise that. Yeah, he saw the opportunity and adopted him.
Yeah, that was the single most interesting element to me on this watch of the film. Yeah, wondering how much, because I mean, he clearly sees the numerical value of his son and like what he can get in business deals by having him around and saying, this is my business partner and blah, blah, blah. But that he does also clearly love this kid despite all of the cruelty he inflicts on him. And then I think he loves kids in general, right? Because he ultimately stops Mary from getting hit. And that's like something he absolutely didn't have to do. So I mean, there's a very interesting element there, that there is this caring side to him, specifically with children, but obviously it's outweighed. But yeah, that trade-off was what I was paying attention to the most this time. I thought it was very interesting.
Yeah, I was a lot more keyed into HW's journey in general and their relationship. And I think it's, I think you're right, it's kids, but I think it's also just family in general for him, because of course you have his fake half brother who comes in about halfway through the film, and he doesn't know for a long time, and maybe doesn't want it to be true necessarily that this man is a phony, but you see him soften a little bit, I think, with Henry, the fake half brother. And in both cases, in both HW's case and in Henry's case, there's like this turning point where something happens to where he is not like interested in them anymore, or they're too, like, they become the humans that he despises, because he says he just like hates people. And I think it's, for HW, it's when he loses his hearing and it becomes too hard to communicate with him. And for Henry, it's when he doesn't know about the peach tree dance, which brilliant sequence, that realization on the beach that Daniel has. But yeah, so I definitely think this is a man who wants a kindred spirit so badly. And I think for a while he sees it in both these figures. That's kind of warring within him with these misanthropic tendencies that he has as well, or desires, because he also says that he wants to just go live by himself off the grid.
Yeah, and he ultimately does do that. There's obviously a second half to this because Eli's integral to the film's message, I think. But what do you think is the warning of Daniel's story? Is it just greed, or is it capitalism, or is it vindictiveness? Is it, yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of sides to it. I'd be curious to what you think is like what the film's really getting at.
I mean, I do think it is greed. It's about, being power hungry. And I think, I think we see that in Eli's story as well. Absolutely. And we can transition to talking about that. But yeah, I think for me, it's about like greed and capitalism. And if you like think about the source material, which we haven't mentioned, but this is loosely based on the Upton Sinclair novel Oil, which was kind of a takedown of the American oil industry at the time that this movie is set in. But yeah, I mean, I think with that source material in mind too, I definitely think it's very anti-capitalist. It's very much a cautionary tale about greed. Do you feel differently from that?
No, well, I think the film vastly changes if it's just greed or if it's capitalism as a larger thing. And I guess where I'm not quite sure myself, but I was curious where you're at, because if it is greed, then there's hope, right? Like they, that this man could have gone differently, that it could have been like that person up front is still beautiful and admirable. But if the film is a parable for capitalism, then that man that we spend that silent sequence with is already doomed because he's engaging in what will destroy him. I think it also changes HW's story, because when we leave, HW is just becoming successful. If the whole film is warning against the system and not individuals acting within the system, then I think that means HW is also doomed, which I think is an interesting element. So I don't know. I was curious as to whether you think it's individual or systematic.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think that the character of Eli is or becomes susceptible to the system of capitalism, or do you think he's outside of it? Because I think that would answer it for me.
So by the end, he's not a televangelist. That's the wrong wording, but he's like a radio evangelist. Yes.
Yeah.
So that is the financial side of things, but most of the greed that we see Eli have just exists within power.
Yeah.
It's not financial. So if the messaging of the film hinges on Eli, then I would say it's more a film about individual greed than systematic.
Yeah, well, and I think I guess that's sort of my point, because I do agree with you that most of Eli's journey is not specifically about his capitalistic endeavors. And so I think we basically have these two characters, one of whom is succumbing to greed through like a very direct route in capitalism, and then Eli, I guess, becoming more spiritually bankrupt as he searches for more power and recognition, I suppose, because that was my big takeaway from his character, is just he clearly, if you're advertising yourself as a prophet, you enjoy attention and the power.
I mean, his whole church sermon, his sermons that we see are very performance based, but even outside of that, he's making sure the road leads to the church, and he's making sure that he can take his stuff on the road, and everything has the mask of doing it in the name of God. But that character is just so cruel and it's painful. Both our protagonist and antagonist are evil in this film, which is interesting in and of itself.
And it's so funny. I think this time I hated Eli more than Daniel, even because of this guy. Like, I think on maybe some level he is pretending to be somewhat of a good person, but I really think for the most part that he's never trying to create an illusion that he's
he understands who he is and what he's doing, at least.
And whereas Eli is just on this high horse the entire movie, and thinks that how he is acting is so different from Daniel, when they are, as he says, they're brothers. Like, they're very similar, and at the same time they're the ultimate foils for each other, of course. I really, oh wow, I was I was kind of rooting for Daniel, like the well, there are so many slapping scenes in this movie, but when Eli is getting slapped by Daniel in the mud, that I was kind of rooting for him this time, and I had to look inward after that.
I'd forgotten how many of those scenes were responses to the previous interaction, if that makes sense.
They are
like
petty.
Yes, like the grudges they hold are fascinating. So like you bring up that slap in the mud, and then the film moves on for like 20 minutes, and then we get to, or maybe even longer, and then we get to that, you know, iconic scene, the "I've abandoned my child." And what does Eli do? He makes sure he slaps him back like all this time later.
In public as well.
And then because he's making Daniel announce to the congregation his deepest faults, it won't be till the end of the movie, but Daniel's going to pay that back and say, imagine this is your congregation. You're talking to people back. So it's very interesting how they both like hold on to every element of their scenes so that it can come back later.
Yeah. I mean, they both hold grudges. So, I mean, because that's like 20 years has passed by that point, by the time we get to the very end of the film. And yeah, they just love, I mean, I think this might be my favorite like duo of all time in film after watching it this time, because just the chemistry between these two of just like how well they needle each other, both through PTA's, you know, dialogue and their individual performances, is so like, you know, like what they're about to do. And yeah, I just couldn't believe how petty they were. And I also, yeah, I really appreciated that long sequence, the different callbacks that they each do to always try to get ahead, because I think ultimately each one wants to beat the other.
Yeah.
Be victorious over the other. And yeah, we can get to who you think was victorious, but
yeah, let's look at some key scenes, because I mean, we have to talk about a couple of them. The one I referenced probably is the most famous scene in the movie. You have this moment after HW's lost his hearing and has been sent off to school. Oh, after burning, trying to alert Daniel that his fake brother is fake by lighting the house on fire, which probably isn't the best way. He could have, you know, written a note. Would have been better.
Well, okay. That's actually very quick point. Okay. I don't think he knows how to read at that point.
Yeah, no.
Or right.
Yeah, I was being cheeky, but yes, you're right. But okay, he could have tapped on the shoulder and pointed and made an X with his hands, or, you know, something other than lighting the house on fire.
I mean, he's a moody boy.
So he's been sent away, and the bandy track will only be given over to Daniel if he repents. We get this long sequence where Daniel kneels before the congregation, and Eli is just, you know, seething and excited and forcing him to repeatedly say that he's abandoned his child, he's backslid, all these things. It gets so feral. Well,
and even Eli is like a little shocked at how feral Daniel gets near the end. You know, lets out this growl after he gets baptized. I mean, it's such a hard scene to watch. I will say, you think that's more famous than the final scene of the movie?
I mean, they're both quite famous, but yeah, I feel quote the "I abandoned my child" and the "I drank your milkshake." But my favorite moment actually is very small in that scene. It's when Daniel gets up after the fact and walks over to Eli and whispers something in his ear, and we don't get it. And I even turned on subtitles just in case. I was like, did they tell us? It says like parentheses inaudible, and I was like, all right, yeah, no, I figured. And I think, and you know, this isn't confirmed, but at the end of the movie with their big confrontation, Daniel says, "Didn't I tell you I would eat you?" And so I assume that's what he says in that moment, because yeah, we've been using the word feral. He's very beastly, and he's growling, and then he walks over to Eli, and Eli looks petrified with whatever is said. So I think in that moment he says, "I will eat you," which is a great line if that is what is delivered.
Oh yeah. Well, and he definitely has the track record of doling out threats like that, because you have the I think it's either Union or I think it's Union Oil, one of the big oil company guys who's trying to get him to sell at one point, and uses his son as like a bargaining tactic, like, don't you want to be with your son? And that, I mean, anytime someone tries to tell Daniel about his son, except for the scene we're talking about right now with Eli, where Eli's making him say that about his son, anytime other than that, he just goes after that person or shuts down, you know, just is like, no questions. No further questions. So that's clear, you know, and I think that points to, again, like he does really care about his son, because I think if he didn't care, then he wouldn't care about like talking about it openly, especially his son's disability. But it is a sore subject when there are all these little moments where people try to ask him like questions about his personal life or even just like how he's doing, and he just does not answer. He literally at one point he's like, "How's your son?" and he just says, "Thank you for asking."
Well, we brought up the climax. I mean, do you want to talk about it now? We don't have to not talk about the rest of the movie, but do you want to get into it?
Oh, sure. I mean, it does, as you have alluded to, it pairs well with the scene we just talked about. I mean, by the end of the movie, there's this huge time. Well, I want to talk about the scene with the son first, I think.
Okay.
And then get to that. Because there's this little short sequence with Mary and HW as kids still, after HW has started to learn sign language, where she's kind of trying to learn as well. And it's this lovely little transition, just kind of seamless, that gets us to this major time jump where, you go from the kids to the two of them getting married as adults.
Yeah.
And, clearly HW is doing much better. And then we move to where Daniel is now in his very fancy mansion with crown molding and a big fancy dog.
Just shoots bullets down the hall.
Yeah, I mean, if you have the space. He looks awful. I mean, we haven't talked about it, but we haven't directly talked about it, but he is definitely like an alcoholic, and it seems to be really taking its toll at this point. And then his son comes with an interpreter and tells him that he's going to start his own business drilling oil in Mexico. And in a movie with so many brutal scenes, it might be the most brutal for me, because it's just, he is totally disrespecting and insulting his son, specifically just his deafness, really just making fun of him. And this is also where he, maybe for the first time, we don't really know, but it seems like probably finally reveals that he's not his actual son. I think for me, this scene is the point at which Daniel loses his last shred of humanity, when he just totally rejects his son and is just yelling.
Yeah.
as his son and interpreter are leaving, like just yelling, "Bastard in a basket," over and over again, which he obviously can't hear, but the interpreter can hear. And it's so brutal.
Not that this, affects any of the artistry of the movie, or it's neither here nor there, I guess. But I have always thought it was interesting that this film that they chose to get the R rating on this film. All it is the final moment, the titular blood that is R-rated violence. Otherwise, the film is strongly within PG-13, and it's interesting that the word that feels strongest is simply bastard.
Yeah, so then, Eli shows up to the house. I love this transformation of Eli, because he's coming back from his mission to Oildale, Taft, and Bakersfield.
Yeah, I was pointing like the Leonardo DiCaprio meme, from What's on Heaven Hollywood.
Not the first time in PTA's run so far that Bakersfield has been mentioned.
Yeah, but Taft and Oildale, I was like, I know. This man's been here.
Some deep cuts. The landscape really took me back to childhood in this movie.
In case you're a random listener to this, not one of our immediate friends. Yeah, Annie and I both grew up in Bakersfield, so whenever it shows up in a movie, we say, "Hey." I
was gonna keep it a vague mystery.
Oh, my bad. I can cut it.
Oh no, I genuinely don't care. You can out me. They don't know where I live now. Ha ha ha. Anyway, Eli is coming back from this mission, and he is just festooned in like a very nice suit, quite a glitzy cross, I think, and appears wealthy, appears to be doing well. And comes in with this cocky attitude, which we obviously realize was kind of all a front, because he's actually just broke. But he thinks that he has Daniel. Finally, he thinks he has him, because he doesn't know the brain and the brawn. That's my little side theme. You got to have both. You got to know about the industry if you're going to play that game. But yeah. The church has inherited Bandy's land, which was the only tract of land that Daniel wasn't able to purchase. And Eli thinks he has him beat, and thinks that he's definitely going to want to buy the oil. And Daniel's response is, as we referenced earlier, to force Eli into a similar kind of public humiliation, except it's just for Daniel, where he says that he's a false prophet and that God is a superstition. He says it so many times until he is, upset. And that's, to me, just a perfect illustration in that, yeah, it was never really to me, a true man of God who is that devoted would not then so easily denounce his faith, even to just one man in a room.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Daniel knows that he doesn't want that land, and he just knows that he has a big hand to play. And that's when we get the very famous "I drink your milkshake" metaphor, culminating in Eli's murder.
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you think? I feel like I almost weirdly forgot that Eli was actually, like, I think he takes him down so well before that I almost don't need him to murder Eli.
Yeah, well, there's a couple things. Eli surely has read Matthew. With the whoever shall deny me before men, him I will also deny before my Father who is in heaven. So not good move by Eli to say these words.
A faux pas.
Yeah, but yes, I think one of them had to die. I think they just were taking it to such extremes, and I've always kind of thought the final "I'm finished" was tongue in cheek because we get the immediate cut to the title card and then credits after the main character of the film says "I'm finished." But I think it is the culmination of what his goal becomes, is just to beat this man, and you can't win if you're dead. So thereby Daniel's won and Eli's lost, is I think the logic. Yeah, I think when he says "I'm finished," I think he's saying that this has become his life goal and he's done it.
Yeah, I think that was always my interpretation of that line, because I think in many ways Eli and Daniel, as I've said, are so similar, and maybe Eli was the kindred spirit that Daniel was looking for, but in an adversarial way.
Yeah.
And yeah, he's done his life's work. He's probably one of the richest men in the world at this point, based on his house in the 1920s.
Yeah.
And yeah, what else is there for him to do once he's defeated the last person who bested him? Because he never got his revenge for the church humiliation, and he got it at the end. He had the last laugh.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, he did win.
Yeah, speaking of Matthew, I did. This film actually makes me think of a Bible verse. So I'm gonna rattle it off. It's Matthew 16:26. It says, "What good will it be for someone to gain the whole world yet forfeit their soul? And what can anyone give in exchange for their soul?" I think that is this film. It's yeah, it's both these people, getting what they can out of the world, but losing their humanity to do so. By the end, Daniel really is like cartoonish when he references, like, you can do your little song and dance, and that image is what I always think of when I think of Daniel in this movie. It's him just shimmying, shaking around like more of a force than a person by then.
I mean, yeah, he's inhuman at the end, both physically and in his mannerisms and his actions. Hard to look at, like, especially there's that brief after the terrible scene with HW. There's a brief flashback to when HW was a child.
Yeah.
Kind of roughhousing as father and son, and it really is a stark difference between, like, the younger Daniel and the Daniel of that present.
Yeah, that was. I usually hate that in films, like when we do a little flashback to kind of compare. But I think it works really well here because we just see, a human versus a monster.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
We jumped past a very famous sequence, so I do want to go back for it. There's this whole scene where they're drilling for the first time in the town, and it goes very poorly. Eli specifically did not get to bless the well, and he will yell about that a lot.
I love that. Just briefly, I loved that moment because he asked to bless the well. He asked Daniel before this ceremony, and Daniel's like, "Yeah, you can do it." And then Daniel does the bitchiest thing in the world by naming the well after Eli's sister Mary.
Well, also, Eli said, "Introduce me as son of these hills." And he introduces Mary as daughter of these hills.
It's incredible. It's an incredible petty move.
Yeah.
But please continue. Just wanted to point that out because I loved it so much.
Anyway, we get this insane pyrotechnic effect essentially, where we have hell on earth, just fire erupting from the ground, and the whole well going up in flames. And it's just shot so beautifully. There's a particularly incredible shot where you have this kind of glare on the lens on all corners, which actually that's a whole element of this film is that the lens gets dirtied a lot of times, which is I think is a cool touch throughout every time it's used.
It gets splashed.
Yeah, it gets splashed. It gets dirt on it, oil on it. But in this moment, you have almost a rounding of the image from the amount of glare on all sides, and then you just have this pillar of fire in the middle, and it's horrifying and beautiful and great.
Yeah. Oh, on the subject of the oil derrick, maybe this is like a super obvious thing everyone that doesn't even need to be said. I don't know.
Okay.
But I do love how much specifically his oil derrick, especially because it has a little building right next to it, looks so much like a church, like with a steeple. Yeah, I just like that's clearly Daniel's church.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
And then it goes up in flames. So what does that say?
Yeah, a pillar of fire is very specific biblical image, and it's used in Exodus as like guidance, but here it just looks so horrifying. And maybe it is still guidance, because this whole thing goes away and saying like, all right, we should stop, because surely we've seen God show up in other PTA films.
Yeah, it's a warning shot.
But it's so horrifying here. Possibly my single favorite moment though in this whole film. It is an incredible scene, but I don't think it's one people talk about as much. Is the first time we see Eli leading the church, and he does this exorcism of the demon causing arthritis in this woman is what he's preaching, at least. And we do get fourth wall breaks inadvertently through the lens getting dirtied and such, but Eli straight up is putting this demon on the audience. I don't know, it's a lot. He's got it in his hands. He's a very physical exorcist. And this is his quiet one. He said it used to be louder. But
yeah, well, to me, it was like he'll be quiet while it's still in the lady's hands. But then once he's got it in his hands and he's like kicking it out of the church, then he can yell.
And I mean, when he's holding this, he says ghost. If you haven't seen the scene, this is probably a very weird description. They're like, this guy's holding a ghost. But he takes it out the church doors and beyond, and for a while there he's just looking at the viewer, and it's such a crazy image. The camera feels like it doesn't want to be there. Like it can't quite keep up with him as he ducks and jumps, and just like ugh. So that whole moment is actually my single favorite thing in this film. I think Paul Dano's performance in this movie and is just incredible the whole time, and in that scene in particular, I think he just excels. And I'm so grateful for this movie for throwing Paul Dano into the front of the cultural conscience, because what a absolute master that man has been across the films he has been in.
Yeah, and he wasn't even supposed to be Eli.
Correct.
He was just supposed to be Paul. That's crazy.
But he was goodness so good as Paul that PTA's like, all right.
He's like, you're twins now. Which I do think, I love that element, unintentional, and from the original script clearly. But like when Daniel, obviously, Paul mentions that he has a brother, but he doesn't mention that he's a twin. So when Daniel goes to the ranch for the first time, there's this moment where he's kind of stunned when he sees Eli, and I think maybe even wonders if this was like a scam.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good.
It's so good. So I'm so glad that Paul Dano was so good, because he also just added even more nuance to the film in that moment.
And then they also get out of it the moment toward in the climax. It's some of the cruelest stuff that Daniel says. He calls him like an afterbirth, and says like, when your brother was suckling on your mother's teat, like who was feeding you, like it's all this stuff related to them being twins. So we'd get a very different version of that final scene if they weren't twins.
Yeah, well, and I think it goes toward, again, he talks about how Paul is now an oil man himself. He's making like a nice tidy $5,000 a week. And again, like, wow, it's these men, Eli and Daniel, are two sides of the same coin. I think is a lot of the messaging throughout. That's just another piece of it. So thank goodness. Love a last minute. That poor guy, that poor other who was supposed to play Eli. Do we know?
Yeah, who knows?
Yeah, not famous. One scene I just want to point out briefly is the scene with Bandy, where this is after Daniel has killed his fake half brother and just drunk himself into a coma, and old man Bandy shows up and wakes him up. And I mean, I think this film, I guess Magnolia was pretty funny. This film is his first that has pretty much no comedy in it. And I think this scene with Bandy is the closest that we come to a comedic scene, specifically the banter between these two men. Well, first of all, Daniel hungover, trying so hard immediately to get into business mode.
Yeah.
Once this man wakes him up, which I thought was funny. And then
the sin of being an oil man or whatever he says, trying to play it off.
He's like,
oh, the sin of drilling. That's what he says.
And then you have this kind of, Bandy, an avid member of Eli's church. That's how Eli gets the land at the end of the film. But at this point, he's still alive. So Bandy, the one thing that he wants from Daniel is for him to be saved, for him to go and get baptized at Eli's church. And he says that, he puts out his terms. Daniel's like, I'll give you $3,000. He goes, I want you to be like washed in the blood of the lamb. And he's like, $5,000.
Yeah.
It's so good how much this man does not.
Yeah. Well, Eli's going to win for a moment, if
yeah, it's an opportunity to give Eli all the power in a public setting right after he just slapped the shit out of him in a public setting. So yeah, just wanted to point out that little scene. I think it's underrated.
No, it's so good. Yeah, I do like that element of the film as well, that we get a good Christian, because Eli is horrifying, which I guess maybe then is paralleled by something like HW being a reasonable, successful person. So yeah, maybe the film's saying that there is still a route, but taking anything so far when you're trying to become so much is going to bring you down.
Could this be another PTA film about moderation? If you listen to Boogie Nights, that was my that was my opinion of Boogie Nights.
Well, we're certainly in agreement that our characters have not engaged in moderation in this film. Goodness gracious.
Yeah, I do think it's another kind of morality. It is striking now watching these films back to back to back how much PTA likes to deal in morality and in like biblical allegory. And yeah, I definitely not something that I necessarily put together in my watching prior to this. So I'm enjoying these little realizations.
Yeah, I would love to know his faith and religious beliefs now. All I could find was that he was raised Catholic, thought it was pretty boring at the time. But there's nothing about what he's been since he's been a filmmaker. I'd be very curious, because this isn't as clear as Magnolia with God showing up, but there is a presence here, and there's been a presence in a couple of these movies, and his outlook on the world is one wanting to teach. So anyway, it's very interesting. And yeah, I agree that these films have felt less connected in the past, but as we've watched them back to back to back, seeing the through lines has been exciting. So it's a good project we're doing.
Yeah, I support it. Let's keep doing it.
If you want to connect with us, I'm on Letterboxd at Ryan Loves Film.
And I'm also on Letterboxd at Annie Morell. We also have an email, retrospectivecinemapodcast@gmail.com. We also have an Instagram, a TikTok. Both handles are retro_sin, CIN. Talk to us. Lubricate some conversation. Please don't put this in.
We want to hear from you. We've gotten, response from friends and family off the record, but again, unless you put it on something public, we can't talk about it. And we want to talk about it. If you agree, disagree with us, if you have some insight that you think will change the course of cinematic discourse forever, please let us know, and we'll talk about it in a future episode. Also, yeah, check out the TikTok where we're talking about modern films in only minute-long intervals for the modern attention span.
Heck yeah. And next week, we'll move on to the next PTA film, The Master, which I have seen and actually just watched for the first time a couple of months ago. So, yeah, I'll be excited to dig into that one. In the meantime,
Happy watching.
happy
Got him.
Oh! Oh! Oh!